pursuit of profit, otherwise known as the old grind, the old rat race, chasing the buck, or what have you.
This is prosperity. This is capitalism with a capital C.
The financial world is a mysterious one. It appears that through trading stock, advancing credit, or swapping currencies, profit can appear out of thin air. That is, money can be turned into more money just by clicking some buttons on a computer or placing a call to a stockbroker. Indeed, much of the confusion and mystique we attach to the dizzying world of finance comes from this illusion of money growing from money. This is inherently abstract. To most of us, money is something we earn from performing concrete labor, and we use this money to buy real commodities, actual physical objects or services that represent labor done by other people out there in the economy. For us, money, M, is an abstract step of measuring value that exists between two very real concrete things: the labor we perform, which is a commodity, and the labor of the commodities we buy. We can call this CMC for commodity, money, commodity. But for the capitalist, this realm of the concrete is not the goal. It is the abstract power of money that is important. To turn money into more money, M to M1, is the goal of capitalist production. For productive capitalists, that is, capitalists that generate profit by selling commodities, the concrete labor process that creates commodities is an annoyance along the way to making a profit. They thus seek to minimize the time it takes to make a commodity so that they can turn their commodities back into money as quickly as possible. For financial capitalists, there is no annoying stage of concrete labor. They move their money to one place, and it magically turns into more money. So why then aren't all capitalists in finance? Why do they bother producing commodities anyway? The answer to that should be obvious. Without commodities and human labor to make them, we couldn't even have an economy. All value in the economy eventually relates back to the labor process. And though financial capitalists may never see a worker or set foot on a shop floor, the profit they make is ultimately, in one way or another, dependent on the value produced by productive capitalists, whether through interest on loans, stock value, rent, etc. But if we let financial capital carry on in its own mad way, turning money into more money through increasingly exuberant orgies of investment, it is not hard to see how this can create temporary bubbles of speculation. Symbols of value, like credit, mortgages, even money itself, can be traded back and forth, assuming prices way above the actual value of the asset, and so the financial sector finds itself awash in fictitious capital. This is a fancy word for symbols of value that are divorced from any real value, any real connection to the labor process, and the way an actual commodity is connected to the labor process. But if you have your thinking cap on, you might already see that we can't blame crisis solely on financial capital. The monstrous bubbles of fictitious values it creates were only a problem if there isn't enough value in the economy to back up all those symbols of value. We must also look to the productive side of the capitalist class and ask, why isn't there enough value in the economy to back up all of that fictitious value? How come there aren't enough wages to pay off those mortgages? Why does the government have to go into debt in order to bail out investment firms and banks? To answer these questions, we need some theory about the rate of accumulation, that is, the rate at which value is created in a capitalist society. The theory of the falling rate of profit is such a theory, and it is this theory that will be the topic of this video after many mentions and sneak peeks and cameo appearances in previous videos. The theory of the falling rate of profit argues that the basic way in which value is created in a capitalist society contains a basic contradiction which destabilizes accumulation. If not offset by some countervailing influence, this will cause capitalism to go into crisis. The basic argument is actually pretty simple. If capitalists see the concrete stage of commodity production as an annoying step in between an initial investment, M, and profit, M1, it is in their interest to decrease the amount of time spent in this concrete stage while getting the most possible value out of it. This is basically what it means to increase efficiency. Workers produce more commodities per hour, thus increasing the physical productivity relative to the initial investment. The problem is that the more efficient capitalists are at producing commodities, the less those commodities are worth. And this is simply because increased efficiency means less labor input per commodity and therefore less value. Meanwhile, more spending on labor-saving efficient machines. So the very actions that capitalists take to generate more profit create a falling rate of profit. This theory that increased efficiency drives down the rate of profit has aspects that are both intuitively commonsensical and aspects that seem illogical. It makes intuitive sense that the more there is of a commodity, the less it is worth. It doesn't seem to make sense that capitalists would continue to behave in ways that drove down their own rate of profit. Let's look more closely at this process and try to unravel the mystery behind it. The expansion of value is the essence of capitalism. Capitalists exist to turn raw materials, tools, and labor power into commodities of greater value, to sell them for money, and then to start the process all over again the next day. Competition between capitalists creates a race to lower prices relative to rival capitalists. But if price were ever lowered below the actual value of a commodity, capitalists couldn't make a profit at all. The only way to lower the price of a commodity and thus outcompete a rival is to produce something more cheaply than a rival capitalist. How is this done? By increasing the productivity of labor. Remember, commodities' values are equal to their socially necessary labor time, the amount of time it takes in general for a commodity to be produced under average conditions. Let's say you're a capitalist who makes widgets, and the average firm produces 10 widgets an hour per worker, but your firm only produces 5. In order to make the same amount of profit as your competitors, you would have to sell your widgets at a higher price. You can't get away with charging more for your widgets because people will just go buy from someone else who can make them cheaper. You will be forced to get your workforce to achieve average productivity or else go out of business. You will be forced to achieve the socially necessary labor time. Now, if you can get your workers to produce 15 widgets an hour, then you are producing at under the socially necessary labor time. This means you can sell your widgets at slightly less than the average cost, outselling your rivals and getting more profit per widget than them. How do you achieve more efficient production? Obviously, you can make your workers work harder, but you will encounter some opposition if you try to get them to work too hard. After all, workers are people with a certain level of tolerance for their own exploitation. We can assume that all of your rivals are making their workers work equally hard. Your only other option is technical innovation. If you invest in better machines, fancy computers, new conveyor belts, you can make your workers more productive. And this is exactly what capitalists do all the time. This is the motor behind the dazzling technological dynamism of a capitalist society. Once you've achieved a more efficient production system, other capitalists are going to want to do the same. It's hard to keep technological advances secret for long. Once all of your competitors are producing 15 widgets an hour per worker, the socially necessary labor time of a widget goes down. The value of the commodity has fallen, and with it the amount of profit that can be made from it. The actions of individuals competing to make a profit by producing at less than the socially necessary labor time eventually lowers the socially necessary labor time itself, thus undermining the aggregate profit rate. Let me say that again. The actions of individuals competing to make a profit by producing at less than the socially necessary labor time eventually lowers the socially necessary labor time, thus undermining aggregate profit.